Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being with us today. We really are excited to be out here in the community and get to know all of you better and share what's going on with outdoor school. We're still less than 1 year into at least the extension role and process, so there was a lot of work that happened before. Officially, we started in September and we've been working really hard to make sure that we're able to bring this opportunity to every student in our state. We're given this amazing gift by voters, and we certainly want to honor that and make sure that we maximize student experiences. And we'll talk all about the history of that and give you some information, but we definitely want to honor the place that we're in, and so it's our pleasure to introduce Mary Liberty-Traughber, who's the Public Relations Manager for Wild Horse Resort, and also a member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. So thanks for being with us today and welcoming us.
Tatsmewi. Good morning. I have to use notes because my brain is not a linear brain. It's more like a funnel cake. So I have to keep myself going in a straight line. So yes, I am an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and I'm Relations Manager here. Fairly new, just started about 3 months ago. I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about the tribes and the land on which you're meeting and how this facility came to be. Wild Horse Resort and Casino is owned and operated by the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. The tribes were first recognized by the federal government by the treaty of 1855, which created the reservation and the confederation of our 3 tribes, which are the Cayuse, Walla Walla, and Umatilla tribes. The tribes adopted a constitution and bylaws in 1949, which is governed by an elected board of trustees. We currently have over 3,100 enrollees. Each enrolled member of the tribe is assigned a number, which is very much a government thing. Out of 3,100, my number is 785, so that kind of gives away how long I've been around. Been here for a while. Wild Horse Resort and Casino was developed for the purpose of diversifying the tribe's economic base by generating revenue and providing employment opportunities for tribal members. We currently employ about, almost 900 workers right now. And about 250 of those employees are American Indian or Alaska Native. But we're also very just diverse. We're very much a diverse operation here, at about 40% of our employees are minorities. Something that I'm very proud of because I have an HR background as well. At its core, Wild Horse Resort and Casino is the tribe's vision to promote and support its mission of economic self-sufficiency, self-determination, and self-governance. We are successful by providing a high-quality, affordable destination resort. Gaming revenue is used by the tribe in several ways: to fund tribal government operations and programs like police, fire, and child welfare, to provide for the general welfare of the tribes and our members through things like scholarships, burial expense assistance, land acquisition, native language programs, those sorts of things. Also to promote economic development. So we have, besides the casino, we've got the museum, Tomas Lick Cultural Institute. We have Coyote Business Park. We're trying to recruit businesses here. We currently have the Forest Service, leasing space, and Davita, I believe, that does dialysis. Also, our goal is to share earnings in the form of dividends paid to each tribal member. And, sorry, I lost my place. So when they first started giving out dividends, they were giving out about $500 a year to enrolled members. And now we're up to about $2,000 a year. So the casino makes really good money, but it doesn't all just go to tribal members. It goes to a lot of different entities. Another goal is to donate to charitable organizations, and I'll talk a little bit more about the foundation. Wild Horse was originally conceived as part of a master development plan for 640 acres of tribal trust property, and in the mid-1990s it came to fruition. In 1994, the tribe started with a temporary casino. It was just a tent basically with only 100 slot machines. We had 5 trailers that were used to house administration and provide space to train employees for the permanent facility that was under construction. 1 year later, Wild Horse opened its doors in a permanent facility with 300 slot machines, blackjack, poker, keno, off-track betting, bingo, and 2 food menus. In '96, the Courtyard Hotel opened with 100 rooms, an indoor pool, and only 2 meeting rooms. In '97, we opened the RV park, also 100 spaces. 100 was kind of the number I think that they were focused on back then. An outdoor pool, guest facilities. The RV park has since expanded its guest services to include the TV village and camping spaces. So, you know, if you get a chance, drive by it. It's really a very nice facility. That same year, Wild Horse opened the 18-hole championship golf course that features 5 lakes, 65 sand bunkers, a driving range, pro shop, and cafe. To the north of our property, if you go down the road, we have Mission Market. It's a community market. It's been there for decades. When I was a child, I used to go there with my dad, and I would always buy a candy necklace and a strawberry Nesbit. I remember it distinctly. So the tribes rebuilt Mission Market in 2003. Back in the 60s, it was just an old building, cinder block building with a wooden floor, so it's come a long way since then. The land for Arrowhead Travel Plaza, which is just to our south, was purchased by the tribes in 1999, and 10 years later, we built the new facility you see now. It provides gas and diesel, a convenience store, and facilities for truck drivers, such as private showers, laundry, Wi-Fi, and a TV room. Retail space at Arrowhead is leased to McDonald's. Mission Market and Arrowhead joined the Wild Horse team in 2012 when they were moved from tribal government management to management under the Wild Horse umbrella. Since 1994, the resort has undergone 4 expansions. The casino now has 1,200 slots, 12 gaming tables, a poker room, a bingo hall, keno, an arcade, a child entertainment center, conference and event space, and 6 food venues. The most recent expansion included the 5-screen Cineplex and the child amenities that I mentioned. And right now, we are in the planning stages for another expansion, which it will include a second hotel tower that will replace the existing courtroom hotel. It will also have a bowling alley, another outdoor pool, a spa, which everybody's really looking forward to, more restaurants, an added convention space, and we're hoping to have an arena at some point. So I mentioned the foundation. I did want to tell you a little bit more about that. The tribes are committed to honoring our tradition of sharing, and the formation of the Wild Horse Foundation was for the purpose of formalizing our charitable giving on behalf of Wild Horse and the tribes. The Wild Horse Foundation has provided grants to nonprofit, tribal, educational, and government organizations since 2001. Since then, the foundation has given $12 million to charitable causes. That's a huge number. So clearly the success of our enterprise has benefited not just the tribes, but our region. And that includes southern Washington and most of the counties here in the northeastern corner of the state. So that's a quick overview of our business and the tribe. And if you haven't already, I would encourage you to go to Muslim Cultural Institute. It's a great place to go to learn a lot more about our tribe's history. So I did want to address why you're here, which is inclusion and reaching out So I just wanted to suggest, all I can really tell you is that a good place to start is if you want to reach out to the tribes. Most tribes, if you go to the government office, will have a Department of Education. And that's a really good place to start because most of the tribes will operate differently. For example, we have a charter school here, but it operates under the Pendleton School District. So, you could be jumping around trying to find the right place to go to reach out to someone. So starting with the Department of Education within the tribal government is probably your best bet. So again, thank you for being here, and we hope to see you again.
This is an ongoing effort that our entire team is committed to, and that is to make sure that we have a presence throughout the state. Because when voters voted for Measure 99, which I'll talk about in a moment, the intent was not for Corvallis or the Valley or for Portland. The intent was for every community across our state. And so we're committed to being in every community, getting to know every community, and being present in terms of holding our meetings across the state. And so it's been great to be out here in Pendleton and the eastern part of the state. Certainly there's a lot more east of us. And so we'll be traveling back out in that direction at some point. In Southern Oregon next week, and doing some similar work at a conference there, but just our ongoing commitment to serving all the communities in Oregon. So I want to start off by just briefly talking about, I can't see what slide is up, so it says Measure 99, right? Great, okay. So little background, and I'm sure some of you know this, but I think it's important to recognize the history and the work and the effort that has been going on for a long time in our state. Certainly outdoor school is not new. We have schools out here that have been doing it since the late 50s, 40 years, 50 years. So this is not new in terms of schools participating and providing programming in the outdoors. What is new, however, is our state's financial commitment through voters to make sure that that opportunity that has been happening in these communities is available to every single student in every single school district in every single school. So that is what's new and what continues to develop as Measure 99 and the voters' passage of that through lottery funds. The state legislature then passed Senate Bill 439, which sort of codified that into law and specified the actual dollar amount and sort of what the expectations were of schools if they wanted to access those funds. Also want to recognize that we are here because of the work of the schools and the folks who've been doing outdoor school long before there was state funding. Many of them doing fundraising and working with community partners and even doing things like selling candy bars and having bake sales to make sure that outdoor school is possible. So we want to honor that effort. Also honoring the effort of the folks, thousands of them, who worked diligently, going door to door even, to convince people that this was the right thing to do in our state. Certainly, it's not always popular to designate or spend funds. And this is one of those things that voters felt very passionate about. And I do want to just mention and honor the fact that we have one of our advisory committee members here who was part of all of that effort and work. So Priscilla, if you wave or stand up and just say hello to everybody. So we've had our advisory committee meeting here the last couple of days. And so Priscilla stayed around an extra day, time out of her life to be with us, to be here for support. So we appreciate that very much. So want to just give you some information. A lot of people ask, so what do we need to do to access state funds? Or if we're a new school system, what do we do if we want to jump into the game? So there were some criteria set forth to provide some guidelines, but also some flexibility in terms of what outdoor school needs to look like if state funding will be accessed. And so the first thing that I would mention is that the standard was set at least 3 consecutive days. The funding then can go up all the way through 6 days, 5 nights. So the good news is there is some latitude and some ability for districts to design programming that meets the needs of their students, their communities, and their educators. So we recognize out here it's more common to have 4-day school weeks. So perhaps a 6-day program is a little more challenging, but the 3 consecutive days kind of the benchmark of what you need to enter. Notice that's consecutive days. It does not require overnight. For some schools, it's a little less of a burden to enter or get an outdoor program, just busing kids to a facility for the day, and busing them home. So you're not worried about lodging, you're not worried about overnight, all of that kind of stuff. We do encourage that districts investigate and try to plan for an eventual residential experience, but we also recognize that not every student will participate in that type of experience, and so there's some flexibility about how you can set up your programming. Program guidelines are posted there. I'm not going to read them all to you, so those are things that you can access on our website, but the legislature was very clear around the things that should be covered at outdoor schools to qualify for state funding. We recognize when you see those things, that's a pretty long list. And if you actually look at the legislation, it's several pages long if you print it. So what we've tried to do is distill a lot of that and make it simple for educators if they're designing a program, so they don't feel like it's overwhelming. We really have tried hard to make it easy to get into the outdoor school program rather than make it challenging. The one other thing that I would point out is that there is no state curriculum for outdoor school. That is by design. So I think, you look back at the very beginning of this process, many schools and districts were doing their own thing. They had customized a program for their community and their students. And there was a fear with Measure 99 that the state then could come in and say, no, this is how it will be now. So we want to echo as much as we can that that's not going to be the case. That outdoor school is designed to be customized for your school, your students, and your community. And so the focus that you might have on the natural resources, the environment that you have here is very different than what it might look like in Newport on the coast. And that's okay. But I'll also mention that there's some flexibility, and we've had some really, really innovative educators who have designed programming where they recognize that their students get the experience in the community that they live in. And so they design a program where they take students to a different part of the state and have them experience a different environment, a different climate. So a lot of that innovation is happening, and we encourage you to think about doing outdoor school for a while. Now you have resources that you haven't had in the past, and so maybe there's opportunity to design some different types of experiences for your students. So we're now in year 2. The good news is we're still accepting applications. So if you find yourself here and you know about a school or a district that has not applied for funds, it's not too late. In fact, we will accept applications throughout the fall. I think our deadline is December-ish. So, at that point, it becomes difficult for us to process an application, go through all the documentation, and get you a board notification in time for you to plan something, which you only have the spring left. So we really encourage early rather than later, but certainly it's still available and there's funds available. So highly encourage you about here today. If you have any questions, or we can guide you through that process. We've also made the application very simple. Year 1, we started in September, and we had to get funding out for fall and spring. So our challenge was to get it out as quickly as possible, but still have high quality and a high quality application. So it was an Excel spreadsheet, essentially. And so it was a little challenging, I think, for schools that have been doing it a while to try to fit what they do into that spreadsheet. It was also challenging for new schools when they opened it up and looked at it and said, oh, wow, it's a lot. So this year's application was simplified by setting a state threshold for the type of program that you offer. So if you offer a 6-day, 5-night program, there's a dollar amount already populated. And if that dollar amount met your needs, your costs, you're done. Application's done. Submit. Everybody's happy. If for some reason that did not meet your costs, you're not done. You just have to provide some more documentation around what your costs are and why. So some of those things that would be higher cost is if you are a rural school system and the distance to travel to get to the next facility or closest facility is farther than the average, and that would be a reason you can apply for more funds. If you are in a school system with high degree of free and reduced lunch population, that could be a reason. Perhaps you need to buy some equipment for those students to feel comfortable in the outdoors. So equipment is allowed when you're purchasing. It may be that you have to purchase some accommodation materials. We had some schools purchase specialized wheelchairs for students with disabilities. That's allowable. We also had schools that paid for additional staff to be on hand for students with special needs. So we goal is, and it's a high priority for us, do not be afraid of submitting costs, even if they're high, if those costs are designed to get students who otherwise could not participate. So I just want to really emphasize that, because there's always a fear when you apply for funds and grants. Well, gosh, if we ask for too much, we might not get anything because it looks like we're being greedy. But then there's also schools that sometimes ask for too little. So I would suggest to you, if you've been doing outdoor school for a while and you've been getting by, you've been nickel and diming things to just make it work, if you've been really burning out volunteers, that you might have an opportunity now to improve the program and sort of move away from that just sort of duct tape and bailing wire attitude to put your program together, that now you have resources to ensure quality. And we're happy about that. I mean, that's really one of the reasons. And I'd also suggest to you that it should be, again, we don't really mandate anything, but we certainly try to educate folks. There certainly should not be any reason why you would charge students for outdoor school. So if you come up with your cost and your dollar amount and you build into that, and students will contribute $20 or $50, I might suggest to you just to add that cost into your application and not charge students anything. That's one of the rules. So I'm going to put that out to you. A lot of objectives there. Some of them have just been accomplished, but we still have 3 more staff members to hire. And so it is a challenge. We certainly are very fiscally sensitive to spending and funding, because the majority of funds obviously are for students in programming and communities. But we believe in a balance. And so that balance is, how can we be as lean as possible and support the over 55,000 students that will be impacted by outdoor school, while at the same time not having too many of us or spending too many resources on our staff, because staff is what costs us money. So, so you've seen the staff that exists here. We are all Corvallis based, but on the 7th we closed our 3 regional positions. And so there will be a regional outdoor school coordinator here that will be stationed most likely in Baker. There's some flexibility in that. And so that person will be here in the community and be able to serve schools on a daily basis. And so that doesn't mean that our team doesn't support the schools here, and it doesn't mean we won't be out here. It just means that there's someone that every single day is going to be thinking about Eastern Oregon, which is very large. But that will be their mission every single day, so that's very powerful. We'll also have someone in the metro region, probably a region with the most resources available to support outdoor school. Just in terms of sheer number of students, it's kind of overwhelming to think about. If I were applying for that position, I'm thinking like, that's a lot of folks I'm getting to meet with and visit and support. So certainly, again, we will be supporting that person, but we'll have someone up there for those community partnerships. And then a 3rd position in Southern Oregon. Southern Oregon, one of the biggest challenges there is facilities. There's not enough of them, and they're far. So certainly if you live in the southeast part of the state, it is challenging to try to put together an outdoor school when it might be a 4-hour drive to get to a facility. So that person is really going to specialize in trying to help that situation. We have a lot of partners, including state parks and some other organizations that are going to be able to help with that. And so we're really working hard to try to bring those people to the table, because as participation grows, capacity with the existing facilities becomes challenging. And so that's one of the areas we're going to have to work with hard. A couple other things I just want to point out here: providing resources, which the rest of the team will talk about. But we're really, really working hard to provide excellent customer service, which sometimes in the education world, that's not something you hear a lot. Even in university, sometimes it's not something you hear a lot. But our goal is to answer the phone, which doesn't always happen in education communities, and to give you the answer and the help that you need as quickly as possible. And so whether it's email, phone calls, a visit, when you need something, I highly encourage you to reach out, because that's been a priority of us. And so even when we're up to the 200 or 300 emails a day, our goal is to get back to those folks in 24 hours. If for some reason you ever don't hear back from us, you should reach out again, because probably something's wrong, because that's our goal. So One example might be this week when we've been out here. We probably have not been as aggressive at getting back to folks. We have out of offices on our emails posted, but it's a commitment. When you need help and you're sitting on an application that you need to submit at 5 p.m., us getting back to you 2 days from that point is not a good help. So always call or email and we'll get back to you quickly. Some people like work charts, some people don't, but I just wanted to share with you that there are a lot of folks that support the work that we do. Certainly our team, through me, I report to Scott Reed, who's the Vice Provost of Outreach and Engagement, Director of the Extension Service. So we have his ear when we need something. So that's also very powerful. This is a program that not only OSU Extension, university as a whole, the provost of the university, the president of the university, know about outdoor school and support outdoor school. So we're in a unique situation where we need something, they're right there to help us. So we have the whole support of the university behind this work happening. I also wanted to point out, I mentioned the advisory committee. They've been really instrumental in getting things started and now serving the advisory role. So those folks are from all over the state and provide input, guidance, feedback. They're in communities, they hear things and they tell us so that we can continue to improve. And we also have a group of resource groups. Those folks are kind of experts in a specific field that we reach out to for guidance in certain areas. So you see the 6 areas there. Those folks, depending on what we're working on, will provide assistance. So we don't try to do everything ourselves because then the knowledge capacity is a lot smaller than we involve a lot of folks. So that's also a commitment. Spirit, we'll talk about evaluation, so I will skip over this part. But I did want to mention some of our high priorities. So one of the things that's important when we say all students, because when voters went to the polls, there was not conditions, there was no asterisk that said outdoor school for all except when there was people listed. It was clear that outdoor school is for all students. So it's important for us when we talk about our goals. Number one goal is to get every eligible school system, district, school participating in outdoor school. And so in some cases that means meeting with them, talking to them, convincing them, guiding them, supporting them, connecting them with other districts who have gone through the process already, providing whatever support they need to get into the game, to get into outdoor school. The second priority is we know that not every student attends outdoor school, even if their school participates. So we have 2 priority areas. Every school system, every student within that school system. In some cases, that means that we may have to design programming that is the same quality and the same educational outcomes, but it may look different. And so a couple of examples might be, we have students whose parents just say, they're not going overnight, period. It's not gonna happen. And while we try to educate parents on the benefits of outdoor school, we certainly don't want to go into a family and try to change their values. So in some cases it might be, we have schools that apply for funds for outdoor school, or traditional program. They also can use funds to design a similar program that has the same educational outcomes for students who may not go overnight. And that may be that you send students to a facility or a camp, and you have some students stay back and they do a day program. They still get that experience. And I would suggest if you think about that to reach out to us and we can help you. There's some programs doing that. And also, the important thing is that those happen at the same time. Because what we've heard from some districts is students will go to outdoor school and those 10 students that don't go to the library, they have a sub for 4 days and they read books. They might even be about the outdoors, but they have to do questions at the end of the day and turn those in. So you think about students out there having this phenomenal experience and students stuck in the library with a book. And then think about Monday when those students that were on that experience come back and interact with the students who are in the library, how that might feel. So we're really purposeful about educating districts that you can apply for funds to do both. And we want to support that. The other piece is students with disabilities. We want to really emphasize that if you need additional resources to get those students out to that program, we have the funds to do that. Please ask for them. But we also realize that there may be some programming that needs to look a little different, or that maybe need some guidance on finding a facility that is more accessible for certain types of students. So please reach out to us for support in that way, because we want to make sure every student goes. Kind of wrapping up, I just want to point out that we're thrilled at the participation in the first year. We're thrilled we've received applications for next year. We're thrilled at those numbers, and I just want to mention that these final numbers will be edited slightly. Our final report from year one will come out in the next month or so. And that will be available to the public on our website. So you'll have the actual finalized dollar amounts and student numbers. But what I can tell you is that participation did exceed our expectations. So participation for next year has grown tremendously. So we have a lot of work to do. It's not 100%, but it's certainly moving in that direction. We're going to work hard to continue to do that. Last thing that I'll share is why. And I think probably most of you are here because you believe in outdoor school, and I don't have to convince you why, but you may be around folks that you have to convince. So the two things that I'd suggest before I kind of reemphasize these 6 things is, one, we're happy to help you. We don't go to meetings that we're not invited to, but if we're invited, we'll certainly come and provide information and data. So if we're invited to a board meeting, if we're invited to meet with a superintendent or administrator, we would happily accept that, and we would be present and assist. If you need more of an advocacy group, like you want to have parents show up to a school board meeting to rally and say, why are we doing this? That's not our role, but we can connect you with Friends of Outdoor School. They are an political action organization and a resource and a support group who can help educate parents on how to go to board meetings and talk to administrators about why outdoor school is important. So you kind of have information from us, guidance, if you need more of that kind of support, and Friends of Outdoor School is a great organization we can connect you with. But these are kind of the talking points we ask people to talk about. We know that our youth need to be outdoors more. And certainly, I was talking earlier, I grew up in the outdoors, I grew up on a farm, but certainly working outside is different than being in an educational setting outside. So that was a benefit when I actually took outdoor school, 5th and 6th grade. We also know it helps academic performance. So if you're more an educator or administrator, there's unwavering evidence that outdoor school has a positive impact on so many aspects of students' lives, including their performance in science and math and literacy. There's also less discipline issues, surprisingly. One of the reasons often students are not allowed to go to outdoor school is because they misbehave. Again, I would challenge you to try to break that myth. What we often find is the students that misbehave most, who are not a safety risk, the students who misbehave most, when they attend outdoor school, they tend to be some of the best behaved performing students at outdoor school. You're putting them in an environment where they thrive. So that's one of the myths that we try to break. Then the last one is making sure every student can participate equity, and before that, the economic impact that outdoor school has. We ran some numbers just in preparation. We're going to fund around $1 million in outdoor school programming just in this part of the state. So when you think about educators and food and supplies, camps, people who work for those camps, there is an economic impact to supporting more schools to participate in outdoor school.
Good morning again. My name is Charissa Jones, and I'm the Outreach and Inclusion Coordinator for Outdoor School. Before I get started, can I see a show of hands on who is an educator or representing a school district or a provider for outdoor school? How many of you all will be participating in outdoor school this year? Is anybody new to participation in outdoor school? So when we talk about inclusion and outreach in outdoor school, we are really talking about getting all students involved in outdoor school. Like Chris said before, outdoor school has a long history in Oregon. It's been around since the late 1950s. However, we haven't had dedicated funding for it, so there are very few programs, either provider-led or school district-led, that are consistent in the quality and types of programs that they've been able to provide to the students. And we also still have, within those numbers, students from rural communities, students from low-income communities haven't been as successful in terms of getting a consistent outdoor school experience. So in order to ground us all, I wanted to go over some definitions on what we're talking about when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in outdoor school. So when we're talking about diversity, We're talking about all the ways that we can or are different every single way. The equity piece is when we remove those systemic barriers and any existence of conditions that would keep somebody from reaching their full potential, which is really important when we're talking about the types of programming that could be involved with outdoor school. And then inclusion is when people are able to come into a space with all their different identities and feel valued and feel that they belong and that they're welcomed. And I just want you to sit with that and think about in the programming, if you're a provider, whether that's a school who's doing their own outdoor school program or an outside provider, thinking about your programs. Is this something that you provide for your youth so that they feel that they can actively engage in the programming that you have, or are there some steps that you need to think about when you look at the populations of students that will be coming to your programs? So diversity is probably the word that scares people or makes people uneasy the most out of all three terms, because when most people think about diversity, they think about race. And that's the stopping point. And even though race is important and we need to talk about it explicitly, it is not exclusively what diversity refers to. And if we get stuck on that, we miss a lot of different other characteristics that are important in terms of what diversity is. And so this is not an inclusive list, but examples of other different types of diversity that we need to think about, including education, religion, region, community, age, gender, culture, and all of those aspects that everyone has and that intersect and make you who you are, and that if you can come to a space with your full self and feel safe enough, you will actually start to engage in programming. So what does outdoor school programming need to look like or need to shift to so that we are actually reaching the youth and that they don't opt out even if there is a program that's available for them in their school district, in the region that they can participate to, and they feel that they will be welcomed and belong in that type of a program. So that all is to say, this is the background, this is the foundation of what my position is, looking at these characteristics specific to each region, specific to each county. And I have an idea of how I could help in your counties and in your region, but really I want to ask how do you see this position helping programming in terms of planning, in terms of getting connected with different providers, or for providers in terms of what kinds of training do you think is needed so that you can effectively reach the youth that come to your programs from different school districts so that you know how to deal with different aspects of the youth's identities. And what does that mean? What does that look like to you? And like Chris said, we're going to go have a question and answer period at the end, so I'm not putting this out there so that you have to think of something right away, but I want you to sit with it and really think about what does that look like for you and for your program, for your school district, for your teacher, for your school. What does that look like in terms of how can you make sure that your students feel in the programming that's provided? In our equity stance here at Outdoor School, we realize that we want, as much as we talk about the Outdoor School program, it's umbrella. Underneath are several different types of programs, lots of different types of programs, because we want them to be culturally responsive and reflective to the region, the county, the school. We want to be able to bring in community assets so that there is buy-in from the community and that it feeds back in what the students learn, helps their own communities, helps their schools, and so that everybody is involved in it. It's not a one-off for that 5th grader, for the 6th grader, for the week or the 3 days that they're involved in that program. That it's something that is continuous and is pervasive through the entire community, and everybody feels the benefits of. That's what we're looking forward to. But just to give you some example of what I'm thinking of, needs assessments. So within each region, there are different things that are needed. Some regions have more support, more resources, like Portland Metro, and so there are certain things that they might have. In this region, what is missing? What is missing in terms of professional development for teachers who either run their own outdoor school program or who are working with providers who are providing that outdoor school program for them? What are providers leaders needing to make sure that they can translate their curriculum effectively to students. Family outreach strategies, how can I help you? Or how can the regional positions, once they get situated, how can we help you set up some strategies to reach out to families and communities who haven't been participating, and to talk about what the benefits of participating in outdoor school are. What are those? And then, of course, there's curriculum and professional development, which I won't go into because Renee will give some more background information on that. But provider relationships, is there a list that would be beneficial for teachers to have at their fingertips of who's in their region that is providing different outdoor school programming, who's outside of the region, if they wanted to extend that learning to taking their students across the state to see a different ecosystem and to look at the ecological concepts in a different way. Is that something that's important? That's something that I think about, but I really want to be a source, a resource that is providing helpful support. And so really, what kinds of things can you think about in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion when you're looking at programs that are provided for you, or looking at programs that you're providing to students to help them and to go towards this outdoor school for all and make sure that we have programming that is available for all and that all students can effectively participate in.
All right, hi everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Renee O'Neill again, and I am the Curriculum and Professional Development Coordinator for Outdoor School. So I'm just going to talk to you about some of our initial visioning for this position and some of the ways that we can support both providers and teachers and districts. So what does our program provide for folks? So I think the big piece is the high expectations and trainings for providers. So as Chris said, we're not mandating curriculum, but if you have looked at Measure 99, there is a lot of different things that we want to have incorporated, and they're really best practices for not just outdoor education, but for education in general. So they're all good things, but they're also things that we have to help providers and teachers work towards. So we have created a rubric which outlines these different pieces and puts them in a way that providers, mainly I think to start with, can look at their programming and their curriculum and see what pieces that they have and don't have. So we'll be working with partners to identify and find and evaluate curriculum so that we can provide access to providers and teachers for curriculum that they can use. This might be through a database on our website eventually, and definitely as people get to know about my position, they can reach out and contact, and I can point folks in the direction while we're building stuff. And as Charissa said, a safe, inclusive, collaborative learning environment. So we're going to be really providing training around making sure that that is the case for students and what that looks like and how to make sure your program is aligned with that. Flexible and responsive instruction, engaged teaching strategies. We know that a lot of the folks on the ground leading outdoor school are sometimes, high school students even, college students, teachers that are doing both hats, wearing both hats. We just want to make sure that we provide the training so that they can kind of see all the different pieces that need to be included. I think that the big thing for us is to help providers and teachers really see that our goal is not just that one experience, not just that week, but to really prepare students before they go, to prepare them, make sure they're connecting what they did before back in the classroom to that week. It is still school, right? It's not just one-time event, and then that they can follow up back in the classroom. So these trainings are really going to help make those connections. So support for teachers and districts, we're going to be providing professional development to help, again, with those connections. So how does what students do at outdoor school connect to what you're doing in the classroom? So pre and post activities that are aligned to standards. I'll talk about the trainings that we have coming up, but Project Learning Tree and Project Wild. So for trainings, we have some curriculum already that you can use in your classroom that'll really connect well with outdoor school concepts. The other big piece that we want to help with is connecting students to their local community. So oftentimes at outdoor school, you have natural resource professionals, folks from local tribes that will come in and work with students, and we really want to make sure that that relationship sustains and that students can continue working with these community partners afterwards. So providing resource lists for specific communities. Who are these folks within your communities that can support your students and teach them about future career opportunities. They can get them involved in service learning, things that, again, show students that what they did during that week is actually very connected to their community, even if they go somewhere else, making those connections between somewhere else in Oregon that they went, bringing it back to what is going on in their local community and continuing that relationship. So, I said professional development that's happening. So, the first focus professional development that we're doing is for 5th or 6th grade educators, really thinking of the teachers, helping them think about how to prepare students before they go to outdoor school and then follow up back in the classroom. So we just did one in Portland a week ago. There's one scheduled on the North Coast, Central Oregon, Southern Oregon, Klamath. There's going to be one in Eastern Oregon, I believe in LeGrand. We haven't secured a date for that, but we'll definitely be posting them on our website, or feel free to email me. I didn't get the dates before we left, but I think they'll be coming out very soon. And then I have one on Monday in Marion County. And so we're going to be providing professional development opportunities in a variety of ways and building hopefully kind of a menu of options depending on what the needs are. But right now we're doing in-person ones and traveling around as we get regional coordinators. We hope to partner more with different communities who have providers that are doing professional development and helping them to also participate. We are planning to use a train-the-trainer model. So we're training facilitators that will have a statewide footprint that will be doing outdoor school programming, both for providers, what are you doing during outdoor school, and then for teachers, what are you doing before and after to support and make sure things are connected. We'll be doing webinars in the future. We'll be doing week-long institutes for teachers and for providers, and eventually maybe even a certification course around best practices in outdoor learning. So how does it fit into educational goals? As Chris said, you're all probably here because you're doing outdoor school, you're invested in it, so you probably have a good idea of how it fits in, but you also can be the people who tell other educators and convince them that it's a good fit. But to me, the hands-on inquiry and standards-based curriculum that that we're helping, make sure that programs are following, really connect well with next generation science standards. Big thing for 5th and 6th grade is ecosystems. What better place to talk about ecosystems than to get outside and actually observe this stuff and do hands-on work. The other piece that's really a good fit is just the practices of science. You're actually getting to do stuff, to ask these questions, to plan, carry out investigations, to follow up, to analyze, interpret. That's some of the back of the classroom piece, just really synthesizing what they did. But I also want to say that people, when they think of outdoor learning, they often think of science, but there's so much more that goes on there. And so for me, the Oregon Social Studies standards are often sometimes even a better fit than NGSS. And so, and then within that, there's often, literacy and math built in. So there's a lot of integration between the different subject areas. And again, we're going to be working to really help providers and teachers make sure that they see explicitly where that's happening within the curriculum and the programming. I don't need to tell educators that social emotional learning is important for students, but I did just want to say that it's very much a part of outdoor school. I mean, these are the pieces where why it's so memorable for students, why they have, in my opinion, these behavior changes, not just my opinion, but researchers' opinion too, I think, that they're really, they're building teams together. They're learning to work together. They're learning to embrace differences and have empathy, because there's a lot of team building built into everything that they do during their time. So it's really helping them build trust, confidence, responsibility, and then to step up as leaders. And I guess I would just say that, you know, if you're taking your students in 5th grade before they're transitioning to middle school, it's a really stressful time in a student's life. And then middle school, all been there. It is a very stressful time. So I think making sure that they have these communities and that they build this cohort really, really helps with their the social emotional learning. So I just want you to think about, that's a quick overview, but what we're going to be really trying to figure out is community-specific professional development, community-specific curriculum. So what does your community need? Again, no mandated curriculum, and what we really want is a resource database that has regional-specific curriculum, so that you're not just stuck with content that's related to Western Oregon, but Eastern Oregon has really specific curriculum that fits the needs of your community. And so just knowing, like I said, we'll be working to figure out who has curriculum that is in line with the high quality expectations that we have, and then we want to make that resource available to you. But what other resources than professional development or within professional development and curriculum would be really useful for your community? So think on that along with other things that you've been asked to think on. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Spirit Brooks, and I am the data person for Outdoor School. I'm responsible for a lot of aspects of data collection and reporting and coordinating. So really what I do and what I am starting to do a lot of now that we're at the end of our first year and we have all of the data from 17-18 in the system, is I'm going to start some data analysis once we get back from our Oregon road trips this weekend at the beginning of next, and come up with data that will inform our annual report. So our annual report to legislators, our annual report to stakeholders, and our annual report that will hopefully inform the ways that we continue to collect data in and for Outdoor School. So I wear several hats, the first of which is as a person that's building relationships with folks across the state and across the nation who are doing large meta research projects for Outdoor School. And in looking at all of the existing research and the research that's happening around outcomes on students and programs in Outdoor School, we'll create a research platform for our own Oregon-specific Outdoor School that's really grounded in Outdoor School's mission, vision, and values. So that's one of my priorities going forward this year. So the other big priority, I mentioned the annual report. That's the next big thing on the list, and tackling all of our 17-18 data. So we've got it compiled into an extremely huge flat file, and we'll be going forward looking at exactly what those numbers look like. It's exciting to see an 81% participation rate in the state of Oregon, and knowing from application data for 18-19, we know that this has grown, and we're looking at a participation rate that's between 88 and 89% for the state. So pretty exciting. We're also looking at streamlining the reporting process for schools for next year. That will help us look at what you are reporting as districts and schools and how that aligns to the legislative mandates, those requirements and measurement. So the way that we asked you to report this year was it's going to be challenging. Thinking about how to analyze that data, there was a really wide variety of responses from schools, especially with those more qualitative open-ended questions. So we are looking to really streamline the process going forward. So the other things that I am doing is collaborating with Dr. Stephen Ron here in Oregon, and he was funded by the Great Family Foundation to create a common measures evaluation tool for outdoor school, and he's just completed a pilot study. So some of you may see some surveys going out for his full study coming up in this next year. So look for that. That's going to be really important information for us going forward and how we create and sustain some best practices around research, evaluation, and assessment of outdoor schools in Oregon. I'm sorry for the text-heavy slides. Again, just reiterating that I'm here to support you in your evaluation and assessment efforts for own particular and local outdoor school programs. Know that I'm a relationship builder, and I certainly want to be a support person to you all as you think about evaluation and assessment of your particular programs. The big question for me going forward is how can we get districts and schools on board that haven't traditionally participated, or they've kind of dropped off the map and haven't participated in the last few years or even decades, and why they aren't participating. So as Charissa and Renee mentioned, we do have data. We know why students particularly sometimes aren't able to get to outdoor school. But the bigger question for us as a large program is who is not attending school-wide and how can we help them get an outdoor school program started. I will also continue to work with partners, especially around Senate Bill 13, the Oregon Studies legislation, and how that may align with our outdoor school rubric, particularly when we think about working with tribal communities and with tribal histories in the state. And all of our research, of course, we're really centering through this lens of diversity, equity, So again, I'm here to assist school districts and ESDs with your local data collection and reporting protocols if you do need that support. We're also coordinating with the Department of Education to make sure that the data collection that happens and the protocol for reporting is a little less complicated. And then know that we're very committed to ensuring privacy of data, student information, those types of things. And then another one of my responsibilities is making sure that we continue to collaborate with partners that are doing research, evaluation, and assessment of outdoor schools so that we're not reinventing the wheel. We certainly don't need to be replicating efforts, research efforts that have already happened or are happening currently, but instead we'd like to make sure that we're building some solid relationships and partnerships with other folks that are working on research around outdoor schools. So again, more of my duties based on my position description. So I just want you all to know that I'm here as a resource. I'm available. I love traveling, so I'm very happy to come and meet with you one-on-one. If you are thinking about ways that you want to evaluate or assess your particular program, and that if you ever have questions about data, what do participation numbers look like in a particular county, or you're wanting to understand more what we're doing at the state level in terms of research, evaluation, and assessment, my heart's on the table, and please feel free to reach out and chat.
Good morning. I guess the first thing I want to say is that we made it through the first year. We have about 10 schools left to turn in reports or to be approved to get their funding. So we're taking a big sigh of relief that we actually made it through the first year. And it was really exciting to see what the schools did with the programs that they implemented. So some of the common questions that we have been receiving, which have been sort of covered by most people here, was who can apply for funding, what can be funded, is there guaranteed future funding, and what is required in the reporting process. So as we go through this, I think we'll have most of those questions answered, but feel free to write down anything that you feel like we need to cover further. So who can apply for funding? These are school districts, education service districts, state-sponsored charter schools, and applications should include qualified schools within their districts. So when they first are interested, a district or a school, they're going to sign an IGA agreement with OSU, and this is a 5-year agreement, so thankfully we don't have to do this process every year. We do not do these applications or these IGAs with individual schools, so we really encourage the communication between districts and schools to do this. Once these are executed, the district can then apply for funding. In the application process, we continue to improve, but this last year was, I believe I've heard, much easier than the first year, so hopefully we'll keep hearing that. As mentioned by Chris, what can be funded? This is a 5th, 6th grade program. Some schools have done just 5th graders or just 6th graders, or some smaller schools choose to do a 5th and 6th grade program every other year. Chris has already talked about a large part of this, so I'm going to kind of skip over some of it, but the district program costs will be included, provider fees, transportation fees, and personnel or stipends. And those are the categories that we're breaking down right now. When you are starting to look at how to apply or doing the reporting, take a look on the website. The budget brochure is in there, and that really breaks down what can be reimbursed. So we have already started having this for the next year, which is what happens if our costs change. And it's really simple. Contact Rita or myself. We know that this is a very moving target. And so if there is any issues, any changes, whether it's the number of kids or you just realized program, the park that you're going to is starting to charge a higher fee, just let us know so that we can make sure that we have this documented for our needs.
So for reporting, we wanted to let you know that we actually reimburse your funds upon receipt of a complete report. That includes at present both a fiscal report and a qualitative report, as well as a copy of your agenda, schedule, and curriculum. We only require one report per district, but that district report must include all of the schools from the district. So we've had folks ask, well, I've had 3 schools go in the fall, and now I have 4 schools that go in the spring. Can I get my money for the 3 schools that went in the fall? Unfortunately, we can't. We don't have the staff to have multiple reimbursements throughout the year. So at the end of the year, when all the schools are done, the report gets submitted. You can certainly submit a report early. We have no objection to that. We'll review it, process it, and get your reimbursement out to you. We are working toward an even more user-friendly format that will be an online reporting system. Fingers crossed, we'll get that done and have that ready for next year. We do have a few scenarios to go over with you, things that have been questioned or questions that we've received. The funding for small schools, we're aware that small schools can be more expensive. Don't hesitate to put in your costs. Are there any other else to
public small schools. We wanted to let you know that we understand that the number of students could increase your per student costs if you have a very small number of students. T-shirts and backpacks, can those sorts of things be purchased? Our general rule of thumb has been that if the school or district keeps the material on supply for future use by future students, you can expense that to us. We're willing to pay for that. You keep the inventory. Obviously, some things won't last forever and you'll have to purchase new stuff. But if a student goes home with material or supply, then that is not something that we'll reimburse for. Right, unless it's part of an activity. If you do leather stamping and you need to buy materials for leather stamping, the kids have to take home something, that's okay. But a t-shirt, that's more something that you'll need to cover on your own. And certainly we've had sort of a fluctuation. We're in a sometimes frustrating part of our program. We really encourage that you go out and you buy high quality materials so that they will last for multiple seasons. We have had folks come and say, well, I can get boots at Walmart for a lot cheaper, and they might last 2 or 3 years. We encourage high quality materials, something that students understand is going to provide them that security and that protection in the environment. How can I stay current with outdoor school changes and activities? Certainly contact any of us. See our website. We're hoping to improve our website over the next year. And any suggestions you have for us for our website, feel free to give us a call. How do we include costs for chaperones into camp fees? That's not a problem. Say you have 5 parents attend with your 65 students. Camps usually is the line item that has the cost for the parents if you're going to a provider that charges for the parents to attend with the students. Just include that cost and divide by your total number of students. That's how we put that in, and it's reflected in your per student cost. What if the number of students and your per student estimates are less than anticipated? That's fine. We reimburse to your actual costs. If they're more than anticipated, let us know what your actual costs are. If we have the funds and you have a reasonable rationale for why your costs have increased, let us know. We'll do what we can to reimburse your actual costs. So I think that might be it for us. What I would say for Priscilla and I is that we're always there to answer your questions. There is no stupid question, as we all tell our students. If we need to ask you if you plugged it in or have you turned it on, we'll do that. It works for us. So feel free to call us at any time. And now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for us as well. John Summerfield is local here to Pendleton area and has been running an outdoor school for quite a few years, and so we wanted him to give you a few words on what he does, how he does it, and you can certainly queue up a bunch of questions for him as well, so that if you do have questions about starting your own school, you'll be able to ask him.
Well, good morning. I'm John Summerfield. First, want to start by saying go Beavs. My daughter will be attending this fall as a freshman there, and I'm really impressed with Oregon State. You're really hitting on all of the important aspects of running an outdoor school program, curriculum, equity, all of the different topics. So with Measure 99, it will be nice to have the entire state on board. I'll say some things specific to the Pendleton district. The program, to my understanding, has been running for 45 years plus, started in 1972. There were 2 gentlemen in particular that were instrumental in the development of the program. A gentleman by the name of Fern Wilcox and Jim Christensen, who I've had the pleasure of knowing and tapping into their minds for great ideas. They got the program running. A lot of people will ask, John, how did you get an outdoor school program running? Well, my particular situation is that I inherited a great program. I came to the district in 2007, and I've been involved as a sixth grade teacher and a coordinator in some capacity all of those years. Prior to that, I taught in the North Plaquemine School District. We also had an outdoor school program, and it was one of the ones where, Chris, you mentioned earlier, some districts will go to a completely different area. The kids in North Clackamas went to Camp Westwind at the Oregon coast, and it was a very unique ecosystem there. You had the Salmon River estuary right outside of Lincoln City, and it was run a little bit different. The field studies were led by college counselors. So I've seen different programs run different ways. In Pendleton, our camp is approximately 35 miles from here. It is upriver on the Umatilla. It's actually off the South Fork of the Umatilla River. It's a very rustic place. It's also a terrific camp, very near and dear to my heart. It is referred to now as Buck Creek Cabins. Years back, when I first started, it was called Kiwanis Cabin. The local Kiwanis group had a vested interest in the cabins, and hence the name. The name has changed. It's a unique camp in many respects. The boys sleep in one area up at the camp at the main cabin, and the girls get bused 1.5 miles down the river, and that area is called Corporation. We have a unique relationship between our local ESD, our school district, and the Forest Service. The Forest Service owns the land, and they own all the sites. The ESD leases the land, and the school district, Pendleton, benefits from using the facilities. We typically go up in the month of May for 3 consecutive weeks, depending on the configuration. Last year, we had 9 different classrooms go up. You cannot take 9 classrooms at a time. We had about 260 kids running around. It would not feasible. So we break it into 3 different groups, 3 classrooms at a time. Like I say, we have so many relationships that we have built over the years. I think I take it for granted sometimes. We work with local agencies. We as teachers don't have to lead the field studies. We rely on our local experts to teach those field studies, and because of that, the quality is really outstanding. Our problem is occasionally we'll have to tell somebody that we don't have room for them. Let me give you an example. I'll just give you kind of a cross-section of the folks that we have on a regular basis. We work with the Forest Service. We work with the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. We have water resources, state level, local level. The Confederated Tribes also provide some of our field studies, and more recently that has increased because we're always wanting to improve our relationship. We have about 20 to 25% of our student body are Native American kids. We have a Blue Mountain Recovery Group. There's a woman in our community by the name of Lynn Tompkins who has raptors, rescue birds, and that is a very powerful field study for kids up there. So many advantages to outdoor school. Chris, again, you spoke to it. What are the pluses? We find more and more that we have kids in our community that have never been out in the woods. They've never gone camping. And you're right, some of the kids that struggle the most behaviorally in the classroom do a great job up at outdoor school. I'm not the most linear thinker either here, so I've got my list here just like Mary did earlier. Curriculum-wise, there's not a set curriculum. I guess what drives our curriculum are the field studies that we have. We run a 3-day program, 2-night, 3-day. Our kids go up on a Wednesday, and it's sort of an introduction day where they do hikes and they get to know their counselors. Our counselors are recruited from the high school. There's a process that we go through. We take up sophomores, juniors, and seniors to be counselors. That is a wonderful opportunity. The kids loved it in 6th grade, and they cannot wait to get back as a high school counselor. My daughter, as an example, she was a high school counselor several years, and it's a real testimony to how powerful outdoor school is. It is the one thing that you remember from your grade school and middle school years. And in Pendleton, it's definitely a rite of passage. Our community supports it very strongly, very heavily. We have had years where the community has had to kick in and help out financially, but it is a community that is really behind their outdoor school program. Just recently, with the amount of schools that were, because of Measure 99, a lot of schools are able to tap into the funding. We got a lot of phone calls. Typically, Pendleton has been the only school district at the Buck Creek cabins. This past year, Union County, Athena, Weston, who else, Matt?
8 districts.
Okay, 8 districts total utilize those Buck Creek cabins. That is that's much more use than we've had in the past. With that, there's going to be a little bit more wear and tear, but already the emphasis is on maintaining the cabin. As I said earlier, it's a pretty rustic place. We do not have flush toilets at the boys' cabin, and that's where the boys and the girls are all day. So we have to be creative about our resources. We have to bring in porta potty units. There are a lot of moving pieces. And if you are somebody new to this, just know that the commitment is kind of year-round. There's so many things to be thinking about in the ways of supplies, replenishing. And I would say some advice to a brand new district is don't bite off more than you can chew. You do not have to do every single thing to make it a top-notch program. Just do what you can handle. Union County is an example of this. They're very small. They had 25 kids, and Carter, the gentleman that was running the program, he was constantly calling me. We are more than willing to help. We're kind of glad to be in that position. Up at Outdoor School, I said earlier that Wednesday was the day that kids would come and just kind of get used to the camp, and we do hikes and a lot of get-to-know-you type of activities. A big part of our program are the art and the recreation activities that we run. Don't get me wrong, we're doing outdoor school up there as well. We do the field studies for a full day on Thursdays, and then runs from like 9 in the morning till about 2 in the afternoon. They go through 4 different sessions, each session lasting roughly an hour. Some of the art activities that we do an art activity called a God's Eye. It involves yarn and string. We're making artistic little creations. We do some rock painting, what are called frames, beading, leaf imprints. So we really keep the kids busy up there from morning until nighttime. And then as far as recreations, we do cross country, hiking and running, BB guns, archery, gold pen, boating activities, and ladder ball. So we keep the kids very busy. I think they enjoy it and have a really great time. I want to brag a little bit about the Pendleton School District. I'd like to show you some of the things that we do that I think are unique to our program. And like I said earlier, if you're a first-year district, don't feel like you have to just dive into this. I doubt that if 46 years ago when the Pendleton School District started, that they printed off T-shirts. I'll bet they didn't do that. But we do that now. One of the things that I love about being involved with the outdoor school program, I don't have to do it alone. I have very committed 6th grade teachers that love being up there, and we share the load. We really do. We have different teachers take on different aspects of it to make it run smoothly. I wanted to show you last year's T-shirt that we produced. Nicole Irwin is a staff member on our 6th grade team, and for the past few years, she has been responsible for producing the t-shirt. We work with a local company that prints these. There is a cost involved, and as was spoken earlier, you know, it's understood that this is funded by you know, the local district. Kids individually pay for them, but it's really kind of neat. It's really nice stuff at outdoor school to see kids wearing these shirts. This happens to be the most recent from last year. And one of the takeaways that the kids get to receive is a lanyard. The kids learn how to do macrame, and it does take a little bit of time in the classroom. It does take away you know, a little bit from instruction, but I got to tell you, I think the long-term benefit out of that is that they learn a really neat skill. They learn something really unique and something that they can pass on to other kids. When those kids become 7th graders and 8th graders, you better believe they're saying, Mr. Summerfield, can I teach the kids how to do that when you're ready? There they are. So I was going to show you just real quickly a little artifact that we have, and year after year, we've been doing it for years. This is my daughter's right here. So this little hunk of wood right here, we call it a wood cookie. It's just a piece of ponderosa pine. Who cuts those? I do. But it's a labor of love. Got a nice saw out of it, so I love doing it. My wife does the calligraphy on there. We do the shellacking. This is as long as I have been with the district, and I'm sure many years before I was there, this is one of the projects that the kids do in anticipation of going to outdoor school. And then the little leather badges that you see, we have a local saddle maker. He is world renowned. His name is Randy Severe. We utilize his leather shop, and for a cost, we produce these leather badges right here. And these leather badges cover everything from the living group that the kids were in to activities that they do. You complete a hike, you earn a badge. And it's really fantastic to see kids wearing these up at outdoor school. It's one of the things that I just dearly love doing year after year. Is it involved? Is it time consuming? You better believe it is, but it's also very worth the effort. So I just wanted to speak to some of the things that were unique about Pendleton, some of the things that we do. If you have questions down the road that you would like to ask, please do. I understand we'll have the opportunity to field those questions. So it's really a pleasure to be up here today, to be a part of the conversation. Thank you.
So we're going to get started with questions. We want to honor your time and certainly give you time to continue to socialize or ask us one-on-one questions at the end. We wanted to do the group questioning. One thing we forgot to mention earlier is ways to stay in contact with us and what's going on with outdoor school. There's a few ways you can do that. One, on our website, there is some instructions. If you scroll down, it talks about joining our listserv or stakeholder group list. That is a process where you opt in. So we encourage you to do that. That means that any messaging that goes out from us will be on that list. And if there's news, you're going to get it that way. We don't overburden that list. Certainly, we don't. Often listservs, you get emails every day, and then pretty soon you just unsubscribe. So it won't be like that, but it will be a way for you to get information that's pertinent to what's going on. The second way is we do have a Twitter account. So if you're into that sort of technology, certainly follow us, and that is just OR Outdoor School. So at OR Outdoor School. You can follow us that way. We also have a Facebook page. It's the same, OR Outdoor School. We also have an Instagram account, which admittedly is not as busy as those other means, just because we have to be careful about student privacy when we post photos. So some facilities, that's one of the things to think about when you plan for outdoor school. Some facilities actually in some districts do a waiver for all their students as they sign up for outdoor school so that they have that covered. Just saying that students can be photographed and maybe used in promotional materials. And then students that opt out of that, they have a way of indicating and knowing who those students are. So often when we visit a facility, that's one of the first questions that we ask, because one of the best ways to tell the outdoor school story is through photos and talking to students. And so, you know, you saw some in our presentations, but when you put photos of students doing the things that happen at outdoor school, it's just like, if a parent has been to outdoor school, it recalls some of their memories, and if a student hasn't been or a parent hasn't been, they get curious. And so we like to take photos, and so when we visit a facility, we always ask, are there any students who can't? They'll tell us who they are, and we'll take their photos. So that's just a couple of ways to stay in the know, but again, as everyone's already said, call us, email us, visit us, invite us to visit you. The answer will always be yes. The condition on that is just when. We will always make an effort to try to be here, whether it's any one of us, our regional person, or all of us, perhaps. We've been instrumental in working with some districts who've tried to move from, these are some larger districts, who've tried to move from a few schools who have participated because they just wanted to, and the district supported that, to large districts saying, okay, that's great, but we're going to go all in now. We're going to go from 3 schools to 45 schools. And so some of those districts have required some support guidance from us as to how they implement that sort of shift in their program. So with that, we'd love to hear your questions, and I think the way we'll tackle these is just on our team, whoever wants to jump out and can, or if that's your area. But also recognize you all in the room have some knowledge, and if you'd like to answer one of the questions, please throw your hand up and we'll give you.
We were talking at the table with Priscilla, who was kind enough to sit with us, about some teachers in the Salem-Keizer and Woodward school districts of Title I schools who are still getting into the loop and communicating with their school districts. Are you planning an information session in addition to the one you're doing in Southern Oregon? I know there's one in Marion County, but is there one coming up where teachers, classroom teachers, and administrators can come directly as they could today in that region, somewhere on the I-5 corridor in Western Oregon?
There's nothing on the books right now, but the answer is yes. What I can tell you that's happening in, at least in the Salem-Keizer area, is there's already been several professional development opportunities for their educators. I had the opportunity to attend one about 3 months ago. I know Renee's been there, and there's been 1 or 2. There's one on Monday. So that continues, but I think just a session like this is not on the calendar, but it's certainly going to happen. So our goal is to do this sort of event on a regular basis in every community. So we will keep you posted on dates on that.
And the notion was that we were going to do it with each advisory committee meeting, but I think we need to make it more frequently, at least once a quarter, and so we'll work on that. And before we let you go, would you introduce yourself and tell everybody what organization you're with so that everybody has an understanding?
Sure, thank you. Sorry, my name is Catherine Alexander. I'm the Executive Director for the Straub Environmental Center, now called Straub Outdoors. And we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and one of the programs that we do is outdoor school. We have 2 models. We have a 3-day, 2-night, and we now have just developed curricula for bilingual 3 consecutive non-residential days. And we're happy to report that we have all the learning outcomes that traditionally happens in the 6-day, 5-night, 3 days. There's no small feat, as you all can imagine.
That's awesome, and you reminded me, thank you for that. So one of the things that you may ask us to do as a resource, particularly if your district doesn't have a lot of resources in terms of translation, is we've already begun the process of translating our materials into the top 6 languages in Oregon. Ultimately, it'd be great if we could do all 153. I think it's actually more than that now, but at least to start, the top 6 languages. And so we know that you may have resources that you need translated related to outdoor school, and if that's something you need guidance or assistance with, that's something we can additionally fund or provide the resource to you. So please reach out to us. It really depends on the ESD that you work through and the size of your district, but we're committed to that. So I think the target group is not necessarily the students per se, but one of the areas that's difficult is if you're trying to reach families and explain what outdoor school is, you don't have someone that speaks the language, and you also don't have materials you can hand a parent that describe what's going to happen. That's a barrier to participation, and so please let us help you do that.
I'm so familiar with the Oregon State Parks Foundation. Before I tell you about the foundation, is it Charissa or Charzy? Which both?
So my name is Charissa, but my nickname is Charzy.
Okay. So you had asked at the end of your presentation what you could do to help people understand equity, diversity, inclusion. And I thought I'd just tell you a story that I thought would be helpful, and it's about getting examples. I mean, I think I like to think of myself as being open-minded and that sort of thing. There was a session about outdoor school or about outdoor education at the zoo recently, and we had a series of roundtables, and I went to the one on diversity and inclusion. And for me, it was a light bulb moment. People started talking about examples, and the particular example that came up was the idea of pulling invasive species. And somebody said, watch out, depending on the community you're talking to, that might be seen as farm work. That might be a negative. And for me, it was a shock. And so I think, not assuming that people understand what diversity and inclusion are, but actually giving some tangible examples that might cause light bulb. So I thought I would just mention, I'm again with the Oregon State Parks Foundation. We're an independent 501c3, and we have been trying to figure out how can we help with this outdoor school situation. After the Great Family Foundation pointed out that despite the funding that has come up, there's still good that there's only enough residential outdoor school capacity in the state for about 50% of the kids to go to a residential program. And most of the capacity is clustered, as I understand it, in the northwest part of the state. So we said, well, gosh, there are a lot of gorgeous state parks. If you draw a swath from northeastern Oregon across central Oregon and southwestern Oregon. And so we said, what's the role for the foundation to come in and try to help facilitate making those state parks available as outdoor school locations? And the parks told us, hey, you're welcome to use our parks for outdoor school with two conditions. First condition is they don't want to build buildings. The second is they didn't want to run the program. So we've been going through a process over the last year of trying to find ways to deal with those two criteria. And the first criteria was don't build buildings. So we went through a process of saying, let's take a model of the Boy Scouts and see if we can get platform tents and pop-up kitchens. Parks said that was okay. We tested the concept. Got on King for 2 years. It worked. And then the second question was, who can run the programs? And we identified a company called Nature Bridge in Washington that has been running outdoor schools in 7 national parks for 30 years. So they have the credibility that the state park system was looking for, and they're apparently willing to be the concessionaire. So we're in the process. We've identified now 3 possible locations. Wallowa Lake State Park here in northeastern Oregon, Pineville Reservoir in central Oregon, and Joseph Stewart State Park in southwestern Oregon as pilot locations. But we have kind of a chicken and the egg problem right now, and that is that in order to get concessionaires to come in and willing to run these programs, we need to be able to say there's going to be enough demand for you to justify putting the expenses up. So one of the things I was looking for today was to hear from some school districts, how do you make decisions, and how can we help a potential concessionaire know that there's going to be enough demand for them to justify setting the
program? Yeah, John Summerfield with Pendleton. Just get in touch with as many agencies as you can in that area. See what their availability is, because they might have 3 or 4 school districts that are already kind of knocking on their door. That's what we're finding locally. We never had trouble booking time times and setting up calendars with agencies, and now they're telling us, hey, we have 3 other districts, we'll try to work with you. So it behooves you to get to them as quickly as you can. I suppose that's it's just one of the logistics that's kind of created with so many districts needing field studies and resources. So I hope I've kind of addressed what you're looking for. Right. Yeah. See if the Forest Service has, most of the agencies have it's part of their mission to have outreach, education.
So when you talked about the Forest Service need to give water resources to tribes, that's what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Susan Beard. I teach in Portland, and we work with OMSI, and they have sites all over the state. And I know that every year their schedules getting more as well, so that might be one to reach out to.
And to add a little bit more to that, so one of the things that we're working on, and again, these things are going to keep rolling out, but is a out-of-school provider survey that will go out. And so one of the things that we see in our role, or actually it's demanded of us in our role, is to be a resource for coordinating sites. And so what we see in the future, and this is a pretty immediate goal, is to have this list of providers in Oregon along with a little bit about them. So we know that the providers range from, we do everything, drop your students off and pick them up, to you can just rent our facility. So because of that variability, particularly districts that are new, it can be challenging to shop around, get pricing, because often the providers will ask questions that more experienced districts would be able to answer, and new districts would say, well, I don't know, what is that? When do I do that? How do I do that? And so I think a list provided for districts to shop around, even to the point where that might be updated where we say it's full. So if you log in and look at providers, it might say OMSI full, and then you can see the next provider in that area below is this person, this agency, and here's what their accessibility of their camp looks like, and maybe they have bilingual programming. So I think that's going to be something that helps. That's going to be something that takes time. The condition upon that, though, is that in order to be on that list, we have to hear back from those providers. And so we're going to work really hard when that list goes out to make sure that we're getting to all of the providers, that they know we're there, because it would be a shame for someone to go to that site, and if we miss somehow a provider, or if they don't respond, and then they wonder why they're not getting the business, or they're not getting people reaching out to them. So that's going to take a really strong team effort, which is why I mentioned it. So you as a provider may even notice that a provider you're aware of is not on that list, and you reach out to them or to us and say, hey, we're in the area, but there's this other provider that's in the area, I don't see them on the list. So it's kind of like, I don't know that we'll ever get to the point of being, Expedia in terms of out-of-school providers. I don't think we want to be, but I think the best way for us to give information would be just providing it in a really easy to read format on the website where people can contact those folks.
My name is Landon Reddington. I'm with Camp Elkanah outside of LeGrand, Oregon. So kind of along the lines of what you were just talking about, what would be the process of, so we're a provider, what would be the process of getting in touch with those providers? Would you guys send out a survey questionnaire to us that we would then fill out and mail back to you? And then how would you reach out in the first place to find out about them?
Hi, Landon. We chatted a little before lunch, but I think this is one of our biggest challenges, knowing how busy providers are, especially during outdoor school seasons in fall and spring. And so I really feel like it's going to be a multi-layered effort. So yes, certainly we will email surveys out.
with information requested, and then some additional survey questions about the accommodations, what how long you can accommodate a school, what your availability is, etc. But if we don't hear from you, then we'll reach out by phone. It'll be a phone campaign. And then if we don't hear back from you at that point, then you will probably get a visit from myself or one of us or our regional coordinator. Because we feel like this is a top priority, not just for us as a program and providing resources to districts, but as we keep growing as a program and more students participate, camp facilities, outdoor school facilities, and providers are really going to be stretched thin. And so the more complex, in-depth list we have in our provider database, the better we're going to be able to serve students.
And I just wanted to respond on a sort of bare bones. We have a provider list that was generated by Friends of Outdoor School. They did a similar survey, I want to say in 2015. So if you feel that you are on their provider list, and that survey was the base for the provider Tableau interactive data that's on the Gray Family Foundation site. So if you're familiar with those things, you know you're part of that, then you're probably already on our list. And so you don't need to worry about getting on it. But if you aren't familiar with those or you're uncertain, certainly give us an email. We have that data list. We can add you to it. We'll send out an email.
Yes, and please respond to the survey that goes out asking for some additional information, because we are going to add some questions that really get to the type of facility that you have, again, what kind of accommodations you have for students with disabilities, are you ADA compliant, and then those will also, what we're trying to do is collect some data on on providers in terms of whether you have curriculum, whether you provide field studies, and some of the things that I was getting at with our pilot study, our common measures pilot study. So yes, you might already be on our database, that exists, the one from Friends of Outdoor School, but also please respond to the new one we sent out.
And this is not more work. Here's the other benefit to that. It's not just that you're going to be connected with schools better, but also another thing coming up, and I'm trying to qualify everything that I say we're going to do so that you don't expect it by next month. So this is probably an intermediate goal, but certainly something we want to provide is the capacity to bring providers together, both in their regions and even statewide. We talked about a statewide conference, because as we visit facilities, here's what we notice. We notice things that are phenomenal, that when we talk about them at a different facility, they say, I want that. Tell us how they do that. How do they put that together? And just that connection, because you can't visit other providers, because during the season when they're doing those cool things, you're doing your cool things. So that's a challenge. And so a way to bring folks together to share those best practices, it is very, unless someone moves from one provider to another, which happens, and they bring some of that good stuff with them, it is very, very isolated. Like, great things are happening and no one knows about them. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is bringing the folks together so that we know how to better support you in your work. So, Charissa talked about professional development. You're part of the stakeholder group that we want to provide professional development to. So it could be everything from camp management to safety and risk management to how to put in a new water system. I mean, whatever it is for you that you need assistance with, that's going to be very different than what we work on with educators. That's okay. We're trying to make sure that every person in the network, every wheel spoke, is taken care of. So
So that's another reason.
Let's go back to the chicken and the egg question. We'll talk about your data gathering capabilities, because I think in addition to kind of holistic providers, it would also be interesting if you guys could serve as a facilitator for the unmet demand. So if there's a way to pull together, a list of schools or school districts that are looking for a provider resource that don't have it or want to change from a day program to a residential program, it would help from an entrepreneurial perspective and figure out where to make investments in additional programs or additional camps or upgrading the camp, that sort of thing, rather than having the provider running around, the potential provider running around trying to find out is there enough demand.
We know already there's a lot of demand in the markets that you mentioned, especially in Southern Oregon, especially in Southwest Oregon, being that we don't have very many facilities that are serving schools in that area, and those are areas that we really are working on getting more schools on. So I think we can with the data piece.
I would also encourage everyone to contact us, because last year was our first year, and so people were just getting to know us. But I probably you might have received maybe 1 or 2 calls from people saying, usually it was an after the fact thing, saying, well, my costs changed because I waited until too late in the season and I tried to make a reservation and I couldn't get this place, I had to go to this place and they were more expensive. Or I couldn't get, I wanted to do a 5-day, 4-night, and now I can do a 3-day, 2-night because it's all in this available. So we're hearing things after the fact, but certainly encourage everybody that if you're out there looking and you're a little bit frustrated, give us a call, and at least we'll have that information.
So while we wait for another question, that reminded me of something else that we talked about in our advisory committee yesterday, but I want to make sure providers in particular are aware. We know that many providers are either barely making it, so their costs are, they're just like, ooh, we can pay the bills, or they're losing money on outdoor school. They might make that money up through grants, fundraising, summer programs, corporate events, those sorts of things. This is more complicated than what I'm about to say, but we encourage you to move towards a more sustainable cost structure so that you're charging schools what it costs to put on a high quality program. That's easier said than done because we know that there's competition. It's friendly competition, but there's competition. So we've heard from providers, yeah, you're right, but we're afraid if we raise our costs, then we're going to be more expensive than this other place down the road, and the school may choose them. So I think it's a cooperation between providers and schools to recognize that there has to be a sustainable model built into how we do outdoor school programming, and that includes the capital outlay on our facilities. Spirit and I visited Camp Tamarack, and they were saving to make improvements. And they came back from the winter season, and their septic system had just completely disintegrated. So there went all of their savings that they built up over 10 years to make improvements. They were gone. So they're kind of back where they started again, and they're going to start trying to build up their savings to make improvements. And so when you think about things like foundations and roofs and even heating systems and septic systems, those things are very expensive. And if you're not budgeting for those, you're investing in those things, then you're not breaking even, you're losing. And so now that there's state funds, we want to make sure that providers and schools recognize that we have to start to move to a place where we're compensating our staff in a way that's equitable, that we are reinvesting in our facilities, that we start to move away from kind of a get by. Because now that the funding is there, if we keep doing that, the reality is that we're going to have some of these older facilities start to be decommissioned. We cannot now at this point lose capacity. We have to grow it. It's much easier to maintain a facility than it is to start from scratch and build a new one. So think about, again, that's complicated, but I just want you to know that you have our support in that, because one of the fears would be that this program becomes successful and as we lose capacity because of older facilities, or we find out it's not accessible because we haven't reinvested, and those sorts of things happen, then it makes our challenge to convince the legislature, which has to decide every 2 years to continue to fund the program. I don't have any reason in my mind why they wouldn't, because it was such a popular voter initiative. It's kind of a mandate saying you better do this. This was not something that barely passed. It passed overwhelmingly. So they have a charge by the public to do this. But we have to make sure that we have the capacity and the quality that needs to take place with this investment. So something to think about. I think that's another area where we bring providers together to talk about ways that they can be more purposeful around pricing. And we've budgeted in our budget. We expect 5 to 10% increase in costs over the next several years. We've pretty much built that in and said, schools, we know providers are going to be raising their fees. It's built into the budget. We anticipate that. Don't worry about it when they tell you this year is going to be a little more. That I think many of them have been losing money and that can't sustain. So just want to throw that out there. Feel free to talk to us more about that offline, but that's certainly a good thing.
Chris, I've seen several people taking pictures of the slides. Do you want to talk about this is going to be on the website?
Absolutely. So this listening session, the earlier portion, and then this question and answer will both be posted on our website. Give us a few days since we'll be traveling to Southern Oregon. Also, the PowerPoint will be posted there as well. So anything that you need, again, whether it be PowerPoint slides, buttons, stickers, these materials, which will be translated into 6 languages, please reach out to our office if you need things like that. We're happy to help you, support you, either give you the digital file or to just mail you 100 of them if you need. That's built into our cost structure, and certainly we're willing to do that. So all we can ever do is say no if we can't do it, but please ask.
Since there's silence, let me take a moment to give a little quick commercial for some free money. Our foundation has a program called Ticket to Ride, which we view as a feeder for outdoor school. We provide up to $500 in transportation funding for 3rd and 4th grade classes in Title I schools to go to state parks for the day. And Jane, we're having a challenge giving the money away, getting people to apply for it. So if you know people who are teachers in 3rd and 4th grade classes in Title I schools, please help them. Go to OregonStateParksFoundation.org, and there's a Ticket to Ride button there where they can apply. It's a very simple application. We want to help get kids out to the parks.
And the one thing I was going to ask Priscilla, do you feel like we've covered things that we need to cover? Do you have any other things that you feel we should talk to these folks about?
I think this was a great presentation, and thank you for putting it together this 3rd day that you've all been in, 4th day that you've all been in Pendleton. My interest in being here was because I'm a retired teacher, and I did outdoor school in Eugene. One of those programs where we earned every penny for our Title I students in order to go, until we got a new administrator who said, got to work on those benchmarks, got to work on those test scores. You don't have time to do fundraising anymore. And there went outdoor school. So this is near and dear to my heart. And I grew up in Baker. When it was, my birth certificate says Baker, not Baker City. Thank you very much. So I am especially interested in knowing that it's getting to the whole state. I did not have this opportunity as a kid. Thank you.
We have the room until 2, so feel free to hang out and talk to us. There's still drinks. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.